Welcome to FRC Media. I'm Keith Tebow. It's census time here in the city of Fall River once again, and I'm pleased to be joined by the Election Commission Chairwoman, Kelly Souza-Young, who is in charge of the census. Kelly, how are you today?
Good in yourself, Keith?
I am doing well. This is an annual census. We actually talked about this last year at around this time, even with COVID. Talk about why the city does an annual census.
Well, first off, it is state required that we do it. They like to count everybody that's in the city, basically for redistricting, grant funding, how much money we receive from the city, depending on how many people live in the city. And it's just important to get an accurate count of everybody who lives here.
So what is the process in terms of the census? I understand that the forms were just mailed out, I believe, late last week. People should be getting them this week. What is the process that people should be following when they get the census and replying to it?
Okay, so once they get the census, they should check everything over, make sure all the information is okay, names, people that live there, people that don't live there, dates of birth, all the information, just make sure it's all correct. If they want to change their address, let's say they're moving or they have moved and they want to change their address, they can put it on the form. If they want to change their party, they can also put it on the form, as long as every voter signs it that wants to make that change. And then they just sign it, send it back to us, and we process them for the year.
Now, in terms of how these are mailed out, are these mailed out based on the voter registration form, or are they sent out based on address?
They sent out based on address. We do a complete census form. We send it to the vendor. Then they end up taking in all the vacant addresses. They'll put vacant. If somebody actually moved from out of Fall River, they won't send it to them. They'll just send it to the person. Hopefully we'll catch the person that moved in, like after that person moved out. So that's how we get a lot of new residents in the city.
So in some ways, if I just recently moved, I may get one of these that's actually just addressed to my address and not necessarily with my name on it. Is that correct?
It'll say current resident.
Okay. And it also could be where if I'm in the process of moving and, my mail is still being forwarded, could I get one with my old address with the yellow sticker on it?
Yes, you should be able to. I guess I think there's a certain time frame before they just send it back to us to say they couldn't forward it.
All right. So let me ask you now, as you said, it's mandated by the state that the cities do a census on a yearly basis. How important is it for people to how important is it for people to reply and send these back to a government center?
Well, like I was saying, it's more based on redistricting for when you vote. It's based on how much funding a city or town would get based on the population. Now, if we don't count the population, the state will say, well, you have less people living in there, less funding that comes to our community.
So let me ask you, last year, the city undertook this during the time of COVID. How was the response last year? And, people are sort of obviously dealing with the same restrictions. Was there a good turnout and reply rate last year?
We actually got a really good turnout. I would say we probably got maybe 60% back, which is good normally we get a lot of returns back. But last year, everybody seemed to want to put it. I don't know if it was coincided with the federal census, because it both was the same thing, but I mean, at the same time, but we're hopefully we get a better turnout this year as well.
All right. Now, is there a deadline for people to return their census forms? I'm sure the earlier the better, but is there a hard and fast deadline when they need to return them?
Well, we do a 10-day. It says you have to respond within 10 days, but I understand how people don't get their mail. Maybe they hadn't seen the mail yet, or it went to the wrong address or things like that. So we kind of give a little bit of leeway for that. Around April is usually when we cut it off, and then we start making people inactive and then send out the little confirmation cards to make sure that they're still a voter in the city.
Right. So we talked about this last year. This plays a role in terms of people's eligibility to vote. It's going to be it's a city election year this year. So if people do not reply, are they necessarily taken off the voter rolls? How does that work?
No, well, if they don't reply, we send actually every voter a little confirmation card. It says, do you still live in Fall River? Are you still at this address? Yes or no? Sign it, send it back to us. If we don't receive that by the time of the September election, what would have to do is you'd have to show an ID. You still would be able to vote. You just have to show an ID when you go vote.
All right. And finally, there are a number of ways that people can send their census forms back. They can mail it back in, but there's also a number of drop-off points, including at Government Center, I believe, and where people can drop off their census forms. Where are those locations?
Okay, so we do, like you said, Government Center, we do have one here. We have it at both Stop and Shops, Shores Market, Shavs Market, Ciabras, and then we started it last year with a fillable form on our website at fallriverma.org. It's a fillable form, fill it out, send it back to us, and we can take it that way as well.
So if people are to do that online, are they should they still have some sort of reference in terms of what they get in the mail? Like, sometimes when you renew things online, they look for a reference number or an address. How would people do that online? And I guess, is it possible that people could fill out their form twice if they decide, I'm going to do it online, but also send in the physical form?
If they do that, we'll see that it's a duplicate. So if they fill it out and then they'd have to sign it. So basically they would have to scan it in and send it back to us if they wanted to do it by email, or they can fill it out, mail it back to us. A lot of people that don't get their form for some reason or another, we'll send them a blank form by mail. But this way, we're giving them this way where they could fill it out, sign it, mail it to us, or they can scan it back and email it to us.
All right, Kelly Souza-Young from the Fall River Election Commission's office. Thank you for joining us as always, and we'll talk again soon. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Keith. You have a good day.